Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmid, also known as Mr. IoT. I am the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, I'm talking with Grant Erickson from Nest and also the president of the Thread Group. Good morning, Grant. Thank you for being on the show.
Good morning, Robert, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. It's our first show in the new year. That's very true.
Fantastic.
So Grant, you got a split role. Tell us a little bit about you. How does that work? What do you work for full-time for Nest/Google, and you're also the president of Thread. What is Thread? Just a little bit of intro would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. So my background, the path I arrived at Thread was starting at Nest nearly 9 years ago before we were acquired by Google. I was one of the first embedded software engineers at Nest, and along with a few other folks, contributed a lot of the core development and technology to the thermostat. And I see up there on your ceiling, maybe a Nest smoke detector.
Yep.
So I had a big hand in that. Sometime along the way in the genesis of Nest, we realized that we weren't just going to be making products for ourselves, but we wanted to interoperate with other products that other people were going to make. And so we needed to create some technology that was going to make that happen. And we wanted it to be an industry collaboration and open effort. And so we created the Thread Group. And one of my colleagues led the Thread Group for some time, but he left about 2 or 3 years ago. And since I was kind of in the background on the technology side from the Thread Group early on, the company decided to thrust me forward into the role of president of Thread. So I've had that role ever since for the last 3 years. Thread, of course, is a low-power wireless technology and uses similar technology underpinnings to something that you might have heard of called Zigbee, 802.15.4. But one of the key and unique differences with Thread is we wanted it to be based on IP. And of course, IP is the internet protocol that we all know and love from surfing Wi-Fi and watching Facebook and Netflix and Google and all these kind of things. And we wanted to bring that power of internet technology to IoT devices and kind of end the trend of having to build proprietary protocols in the home or commercial buildings and then build gateways and translators and proxies and then translate that to more web-based things. We wanted devices to directly talk to mobiles and devices to directly talk to cloud services, and Thread is the technology that allows us to do that. And so when you look at that smoke detector there, it's actually using the very same protocols to talk amongst other smoke detectors in your house as it is to talk to the Nest cloud services that service that smoke detector.
So basically, my Nest thing up there has an IP address, basically, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does.
And when I compare this to my headset here, that one does not.
That's correct.
So sort of like a little bit of the difference.
Exactly.
So I think you said you were employee 5 at Nest. You must have a ton of Nest devices at home. How Nestified are you at home?
I'm pretty Nestified. I think I've got 11 smoke and CO detectors, and I think I have 9 thermostats. So we're a very Nest-friendly family at home.
Wow, I don't even know where I put 9 thermostats in my house, but yeah, so very cool, very cool. So we met during the Zigbee Hive event. So tell me a little bit. I know you guys had a press release today, so I'm slightly confused. Is this a competing standard? Are you working together? Tell us about that.
We have a long-standing collaboration with Zigbee. Of course, as I mentioned, at the very lowest layer of what we call the internet stack, we share the same radio, which is 802.15.4. And historically, Zigbee is really a leader in the IoT space in that some decade and a half ago, they were really working hard to figure out how to get devices to connect wirelessly and really pushing the envelope of microcontrollers and radio technology at the time. And 15.4 is really a fantastic radio from a low power perspective and having things work wirelessly with batteries and coin cells and things like that. But where we sort of changed from sort of what you might perceive as competition to partners is Zigbee realized that the world was transitioning to IP-based connectivity, and with the Internet of Things, it wasn't just about devices, it was also about mobiles and cloud services. And typically, as we talked about earlier, to connect those two worlds together, you have to build bridges and translators and proxies and gateways, and that gets expensive and it's hard to maintain and manage, and there's engineering overhead and all of that. And Zigbee realized what they have is really 15 plus years of experience of working with major industry collaborators on defining what is a light switch, what is a thermostat, what is a door lock, what is home automation, what is a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And so those data models, that notion of what a device is and how do you interact with it, was really one of the key value propositions of Zigbee. And so they've lifted that up and peeled it off and have rebadged it as dot dot. And dot dot can now run over a legacy Zigbee network on top of 802.15.4, but can also run on top of any IP network like Thread or Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And so because of that, we now can pair dot dot with Thread and have a great collaboration using dot dot as the application layer for a Thread network and for Thread IoT devices.
So the press release today, what was that about?
Yeah, so we've been working really hard on making sure that these two technologies work very well together. And of course, product implementers, what they want is something that's turnkey, works well, is proven, and they want certified solutions so that they know their products will work well with other products in the market. So what we've announced today is the release of the dot dot specification, which any Zigbee now member can now access, and a joint certification program so that you can go to a number of worldwide test labs with your product and simultaneously certify it both for Thread as well as for dot dot, and knowing and getting that assurance that your product will work with any other Thread product or will work with any other Zigbee dot dot product.
So today, if I build a new product, I come up with a new idea and I want to make a product that collaborates with lots of different other products. Do I still have to choose now between Zigbee and Thread, or when I go dot dot, I'm both working in both networks?
Yeah, I mean, if you choose dot dot, fundamentally, you're choosing the strong legacy of Zigbee. Again, all this decades plus of experience. If you want to work, say, with a dot dot product and a legacy Zigbee product, you still need some level of translation that can mechanically translate between that legacy, what we call Zigbee Pro or Zigbee 3, to dot dot. And of course, if you're choosing dot dot over Thread, that means that you get to leverage that same Thread network that can be used for other application layers. You might have heard of something called OCF. Here at Google, we have something we call Weave. There are other application layers, lightweight M2M, et cetera. And so one of the beauties of Thread, of course, is that it's like Wi-Fi, it's shared infrastructure. You don't actually have to have a dedicated network for each application layer. You can actually use a single network for many application layers.
So, by the way, if you're just joining us, I'm Robert Schmid, the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte, and you're watching Coffee with Mr.IoT. Today, my guest is Eric Grantson, and we are talking about Grant Erickson. Man, how did I do that? Sorry, Eric. Sorry, Grant.
No problem.
That happens once in a while. My mind gets jumbled. So, I think what I was going for is saying, this is really complicated, or is it not?
IoT is complicated, and I think we saw probably 5 years ago that there was just a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and hype in the IoT market. We were probably at the peak of inflated expectations in the Gartner hype cycle. There's been a lot of consolidation and a lot of sort of churn in the market since then, but I think there is fundamentally still a lot of value in IoT. And what companies realized is it's more than just adding a radio to a product and say, hey, I've got this great smart product and it's going to be wonderful and we're going to make all sorts of money. It is a hard thing to do. But one of the things, particularly with dot dot and Thread, is that we're trying to make the previously impossible possible and the hard easy. And so by really packing a lot of intelligence, engineering expertise, certification expertise in these turnkey solutions, the goal really is to make IoT, which is very hard, easy and turnkey for companies and people that want to build products.
So we're just like a week away. Next week, CES starts, right?
Yes.
So the Consumer Electronics Show, Nest, Google, and so forth. You're very heavy into the home IoT space. I know I'm going to be there next week. You said you're not going. If you'd be going, what would you be looking for? And tell us a little bit your thought on what goes on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, CES, of course, is the mecca for all things consumer and home and IoT these days. The IoT pavilions over in the Sands are just wonderful to see what's going on. But what I really look for is, where are the companies that are truly breaking the mold in terms of bringing reality into the smart, thoughtful, and intelligent home. We talk about products that might have a radio in them and think, oh, they must be smart. And we hear the analysts talking about connected products as being smart. But being connected alone doesn't make them smart. We really need that level of thoughtfulness, that level of intelligence. And certainly companies like Google are working hard to bring that intelligence, that thoughtfulness into those products. And certainly our competitors, Amazon, are working hard as well. But really want to see companies that are truly making those IoT devices truly thoughtful and truly working for me, as opposed to, in many cases today, IoT is a lot of me working for my IoT devices, which isn't so rewarding.
So that's just really interesting. So what you're saying is it's not just a radio that talks. The radio's got to be helping me. Tell me, what makes the difference for you? Where's sort of like this distinction that you find?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally the connectivity has been about getting data and telemetry and maybe then returning things around and telling the device to do things for you, which is what we call actuation. But there has to be some level of intelligence, even at the device, where the device is learning based on the data it's gathering about patterns and usage and things like that, and can then suggest and make recommendations either directly to the user or to work with other IoT devices to make those recommendations on your behalf. And that's really that machine learning and that insight and that development of context and intelligence that is really the very important thing. So it's, you walk into the room and of course you can turn and hit the light switch and the light might be wirelessly connected to the bulb. But what you want to have happen is either the light turns on automatically or it says, hey, Robert, it's getting dark outside. Do you want me to turn the light on for you? And you're like, yeah, I'd like that. That'd be really nice. Thank you. And that's the thoughtfulness. That's the intelligence that we really want to see. And it might be even additional context to recognize that, hey, your mother-in-law, your mother might be visiting you this week, and maybe she doesn't want the light on, and recognizing there's a difference between your mother, your mother-in-law, and you, Robert, and you have different preferences for that room. And being able to learn those automatically over time without you actually having to program it or set up those rules and those kind of things.
I have to say, I know you're not going to say much on this, but it's just, when you talk about the talking light switch, I got to think about how my Protect up there talks to me. And I'm kind of like, are you going to give me a Nest light switch that's going to talk to me? Because that's one of the areas you actually have stayed away from as Nest and so forth. But I have a different question for you. That was just me thinking what you were talking about. But my question for you is, I often say all things will be connected. And, there was sort of like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it might have been Cisco who really had this idea that everything will be connected. And people laughed at it then, right? And I think today it's more sort of a question of, which things will not be connected, right? I have this idea. I was sort of like, I said this a month ago, so I had a conversation with someone and I said, all things over $100 will be connected. And people didn't argue with me anymore that things will be connected. I said, oh, no, it's 50. And it was like, this is such a funny shift of the conversation where you talk about not if it will be connected, but like how cheap does it have to be? What do you think about this, all things will be connected? Or do you think actually we're going to stay disconnected on some things? And what's your thought on that?
No, I think it's a good prediction, and I think you're right that it is becoming more about the price point. And as we look at where silicon goes, it's all about more integration, more features in either similar silicon area or less silicon area. One of the interesting things though with connectivity is that we're not necessarily bound by what the silicon do, but it's what batteries can do, and that's really in many cases one of the limitations for a lot of different IoT devices. But I do principally agree that it'll be a question of if and what, or when and what price point, rather than if altogether. And that really harkens back to what I said earlier, is it's so important that we get these fundamentals about security and reliable connectivity and all these kind of nitty-gritty details right, so that we can really move up the value stack and what connectivity provides and focus less on the mechanics of connectivity and more on the value of connectivity. And again, that's a really key thing. What we're trying to do with Thread is bring all those best practices to bear so that you really have a turnkey solution. You can start building that value on top.
So if someone wants to start creating a smart home, where do you send them? And I know you're probably going to say the thermostat, but just really, what's really the simple thing for someone that doesn't really know much about IoT and the home, but they know they want to go there? What do you recommend they do?
I think it's really focusing on what the value proposition or what the pain points they have. I mean, if you look at the consumer mindset in particular, again, there are early adopters who say, oh, connectivity, the technology, great, I want to go try that. But for most people, for the mainstream, the mass market, they either want to save money, they want to be entertained, or they want to feel more secure, or they, again, want to solve some daily pain point. And so I think for most consumers, it's ask yourself, what is that pain point that you want to go solve? A good example personally is we recently moved into a new house, and my wife said, I want no keys. I want to get rid of all metal keys. I don't want to have jangly things in my purse anymore. And so our IoT journey was, how do we find a solution where we can get rid of all the keys in our house? And so that really put us down the connected door lock path and trying to explore that particular market. For a lot of people, it's about lighting. And, I want to create moods when my guests come over, or I like to throw a lot of parties, and we like to have color lights that change to the music and things like that. And so they go down the lighting path. But you really have to find what that mission, what that value proposition is for you as a consumer, and then go pursue that part of the market.
I just had my mom over from Austria, and so I'm originally from Austria, so she speaks German, very little English. And one of the things I've done is I actually don't like switches and stuff like this because I'm never at the right place to turn stuff on. So I put a bunch of voice-controlled devices, have a bunch of Google Home standing around. And I couldn't teach her how to say the right command for whatever reason. She couldn't get it, so the lights stayed on all night with her, and she was okay with that. But I'm curious because I'm saying this because one of the things I've noticed, this goes back to smart, one of the things about the Nest thermostat is I actually, for whatever reason, I wouldn't touch the thermostat anymore. One of the things was like, it was just there and turned the heat on and off, and it happened to be working for me for the most part. And here and there in the house, we wanted different temperatures, so then we picked up the phone. What's your take on voice controlled? How much do you do voice control in your own house, in your own home? And so what's the personal journey, and what do you think professionally about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take off my official hat. In our household, we actually have no voice control whatsoever. And most of the time, we have a teenage daughter, and we find that we're yelling and commanding her plenty. What we don't want to do is do more yelling and commanding at our house. And by and large, like I said, with thermostats and things like that, it just works and does what you need it to do and really fulfills that vision of the devices working for us as opposed to us working for the devices. So I think, again, personally, not representing any official organization I work for, that voice control is probably kind of at the peak of early adopter interest and things like that. But there'll be a time probably in the next year or two where that settles out and people will decide it's either valuable for them or it's a novelty and the novelty is worn off. But again, I think, it comes back to when we look at, or at least when I look at what the original mission we set out with Nest was, thoughtful intelligence that works for you rather than the other way around. When we achieved the nirvana of kind of what I think we originally thought about IoT being in the early days is things just happen for you. You don't actually have to command them. And I think that's the nirvana I'm looking for personally. Of course, putting my official hat back on, there is a ton of interest from a lot of people in voice. And there are, if you look at disabilities or special needs access, voice is a tremendous enabler for those people. That's really a great value. And again, you look at kids just being able to ask questions in a natural language way and do all sorts of interactions. It really is a new interaction surface in the same way that our mobiles and computers were before. And from that perspective, I think voice will have a great future and a strong future in that it is just, again, a great natural human interaction surface.
I have to tell you the comment about you and your daughter and commands. My kids are out of the house. I'm like, oh, what does that tell about me that I'm actually don't mind giving commands all the time in my house? But in any case, I'm going to leave it at that. That's an interesting concept. So where can you take us with Thread? What are the next steps for Thread, and what are you thinking about? What's on your mind when you think of Thread? And
yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Robert. So we really spent a lot of time early in the development of the Thread group and the Thread specification, working and focusing on the home. And we think now with the 1.1 version of the Thread specification that's been out since 2016, that's being adopted by Nest and Legrand and other companies, really is a strong solution for the home. One of the things we got a lot of feedback on based on the strength of our 1.1 thread offering for the home is commercial companies were kind of looking at their next decade of investment of where is wireless going in the commercial and enterprise building space, building management, et cetera. And there'd been a pretty strong proliferation of a number of different technologies in those spaces. And they're also recognizing that, hey, we've got all these IT systems that are running IP, and yet we have all this operational technology that is running these different silos of technologies for controlling building management and lighting, et cetera. And they really wanted to move wirelessly and move forward into the world of IP. And so they looked at a lot of different things, and they actually thought Thread was the right solution for them. So we're actually just on the tail end of what probably will be called Thread 1.2, which is an incremental evolution of the Thread specification to add considerations for commercial and enterprise. We'll have hooks for better, we call AAA integration, so authorization, who has the authority to do this, that, or the other thing. Scalability, again, a big commercial building is like a lot of homes together, and so how do you manage multiple thread networks as one virtual network to really enable enterprise use cases? And then better mobility. Again, you have devices in an enterprise perhaps moving more often, getting shuffled around in a commercial environment than you may in the home. We wanted to make that easier. And so our 1.2 spec will hopefully be done and released at the end of this year. We're very nearly completing the technology and the spec work, and things are really going well, and our commercial partners are really excited about that. So Thread and commercial is definitely the next big push for us in 2019 and beyond.
So when you say the end of this year, you mean the end of 2019, or you
yes,
mean...
that's correct.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Yep.
I'm still trying to switch over my years.
Yes. How long will we still be writing 1.8 at the end of our checks and other things?
I know. So commercial, big push for you, big of interest. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in the industrial IoT space in factories and so forth. So great to hear. I'm going to be really curious to see what happens there. What's your take on edge? One of the things that fascinates me is, if I think about it, with so many more smart things, smart is sort of relative. What is smart? But let's just say we have compute in so many things around us now. Where do you think that's going to go? Is there going to be some sort of a framework to help us take advantage of the edge compute power that we have? Are people going to start sharing edge compute power? What's your take on that?
That's a great question, Robert. I think there's a lot of interesting things that can come out of edge. I mean, the first is just recognizing first and foremost that edge actually isn't as new as we think it might be. We talked earlier in commercial and enterprise and industrial, in fact, about these islands of operational tech. The gateways, proxies, and translators that allowed those operational technology islands to interface with the IT infrastructure were actually the first bits of edge IoT that we've seen, and those have been around for a decade or more. So that whole value proposition of edge, I think, will remain, is how do you bring those legacy devices that aren't IP-based into the connectivity of the mobile and the cloud services, et cetera, world. I think the other key thing to recognize is whether it's data privacy, whether it's control, whether it's regulatory, there will be cases where you really want data to be homed and secured at rest within your own premise, the areas that you control. And maybe you'll have copies of it in the cloud, but fundamentally the primary copy, the source of truth, will be within your own premise. And the edge has value for that as well. And then, of course, whether we look at things like that smoke detector over your shoulder or lighting, there are latency and safety and security use cases for which you need immediate reaction and immediate control, and you don't have control over the latency of that round trip to the cloud. And if you need something that needs to happen in 200 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds, the edge is the way to get that done. And so I think the challenge for the industry will be, rather than having organizations and people developing technology have to make hard choices about, well, do I use this set of tech for the edge and this set of tech for the cloud? It'll really be making things smooth and fluid, so that the difference between cloud and edge is really more of a configuration and a policy change on the fly, perhaps, and less of a re-architecting the system kind of change, and so that you really can have that fluidity between edge and cloud. And then that may bring about use cases, as you said, is, well, we need more scale and more capacity. And just like the cloud today, where adding more scale and capacity is fairly easy, we need to make that as easy at the edge as well, so that companies can really easily scale and then grow the edge within their own premises as they see fit, as their use cases demand.
I have this fantasy that one day I don't have a box sitting here anymore that actually is a computer, but my computer is in all my edge devices. because every device has a computer and they just can all work together. But I think that's still a bit away. So
yeah, it's a good vision, and I think it is a bit away, but I think you're on the right track there.
So Grant, we're coming to the end of the show. Anything I didn't ask you or we didn't get to talk about that you want to close with? Any closing thoughts on your end?
No, but I think, again, the important thing as we look forward to IoT is smart intelligence, your devices working for you rather than you working for your devices. And again, Thread is really about end-to-end connectivity and getting rid of those gateways where you don't need them, and adding the edge where you do need them, and making that all very fluid. But excited to be on your show this morning, and if you and the folks at Deloitte have any other questions about Thread and end-to-end wireless IP connectivity, I'm always happy to come back and chat more.
Grant, thank you so much. It's been great to have you on my show. And please join me again next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another Coffee with Mr. IoT. And in case you missed any part of today's conversation, just come back to my YouTube channel and watch Grant talk about Thread or any past shows. And with that, happy Friday, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Robert. Enjoy CES.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.